Well, welcome everybody to the Ask an Accountant podcast, where we demystify accounting by simply asking your pressing questions from the industry's best and brightest. My name's Tony Wilson, your host, quirky friend, and total accounting nerd. Today, I'm joined by my friend, Jamie Skinner, an organizational efficiency consultant that helps high-growth CPG businesses improve and scale by mastering their operations and inventory. Jamie, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tony. So excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so good to have you. Jamie, I think one of the many reasons I should say, I'm super excited to have you on today is you and me, share a number of similarities.
Yep.
For one, we have established that our personalities best resemble that of a golden retriever.
Yep.
So we've got that going for us, which is great.
Yeah.
Like tapping into that, like I know for me what that looks like and what that means, but like when people think about Jamie Skinner, like they think golden retriever, like what is it that comes to their mind that's like, oh yeah, she's totally golden retriever?
I just always think of the dogs that are like, ooh, shiny, like just, always happy and distracted easily and stuff. So yeah.
I'm right there with you. I
Yeah.
mean, one could argue I started a business because of that, right? Like
Yeah.
then I can just kind of go in any of those different
Mhm.
directions. It's a great thing
Yeah.
about entrepreneurship. You can be the golden retriever you were always meant to be.
Yep. Absolutely.
Totally the case. So that's one area that we're similar in. Another
Mhm.
thing that's really cool is that we're both CPAs with corporate experience. So
Mhm.
we both have that background. And last but not least, we are both very passionate about process improvement. Is that right?
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
That's literally like your whole shtick is
Yep.
organizational efficiency and process improvement, right?
Yep. That's my bread and butter.
I love it. And when I found out that you were doing that, I was like, oh my gosh, can we please have you on the show? Because this
Yep.
is so great. So with all of that in mind, I think it would be super great for our listeners is to
Mhm.
hear a little bit about your story, right? So you're at this point now where you're an organizational efficiency consultant, but you didn't start there, right? You started somewhere else.
Yeah.
You've made your way. Talk to us a
Mhm.
little bit about what that story has looked like for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, funny if you hear the question of like, oh, if you wanted to do, what you wanted to be when you were growing up, are you doing that now? My question is always, no way. So growing up, I always wanted to be a first grade teacher, and so I used to love going back to school and hanging out and helping my old teachers out and stuff. When I got into college, I went and took my first early childhood education courses and didn't like it. So I decided to just wing it until I could figure out something else to do. I had never been exposed to accounting until I was about 19 and I was working at a car dealership, a large Chevrolet dealership in California. And I was the office clerk and I asked, hey, I've got time. Can I help anybody with something? And I was given something that had debits and credits on it. My mind was blown. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. I love this. I've got to find out more about this. And so I went to school for it. And that's kind of how I fell into it. And there was just really no looking back for me. I graduated from Sacramento State with my bachelor's of accountancy. I attempted my master's program, but never finished it. Um, and then I decided to get my CPA license. So it took me a number of tries, but I got through it and got licensed in 2015. And I've just kept it up since then. So, I
Which,
had about
well,
10 years.
Well, I was going to say with that, so two things. Number
Yeah.
one, I think we got licensed in the same year. So
Oh, that's
that's
cool.
super great. 2015 all
Yeah.
the way.
Woo!
Also, I tell people frequently, CPA really stands for can't pass again because that was a tough test,
Yes,
tough
it was.
series of tests. So well done on
Definitely.
that. Well done on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you keep
No,
going.
that's totally fine. I don't think I could pass it again either. But I have about 10 years of corporate experience in a lot of different industries. And I think I've told you about this before. I was kind of a job hopper. My first full-time job, I was there for about 4 years, but then after that, it was probably like every 6 months to a year, I was moving to a different job, and every time it was in a different industry. So once I kind of found my love for process improvement, that's kind of what I did every single new job was that I'd go in, I'd make changes, and I just fell in love with that whole aspect of it. And I think that's kind of what set me up for moving into being a consultant, because I just wanted to do that part of it for lots of different companies. So that's kind of what led me to start my own business. I did that in 2018, where I was, to get my foot in the door, I just focused on accounting, but I've been making the transition over to helping with the process improvement and efficiency aspect as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super cool. And I remember when you told me a little bit about your story, that was something that I thought was unique. When we talk about like, well, why does somebody pursue a job in consulting? Like, why wouldn't they
Mm-hmm.
just be an employee and stuff?
Yeah.
And it kind of gets to what you were just saying, where it's like you realize that the thing that's most satisfying in the job is
Mm-hmm.
that progression. It's like things
Yeah.
were at this state, and now I've brought them to this state, and I
Mm-hmm.
can hand them off to the next person.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
what can I do to like maximize the best for the economy
Yeah.
in a period of time? And it's like for you, like, and for me both,
Mm-hmm.
like for both of us, we love
Yeah.
consulting because that's kind of our bread and butter. We love that
Yeah.
definitive point in time, not just like being there
Mhm.
forever.
Yeah.
So that is
That's a
that.
really good way to explain it. That's
Right.
absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's so great. So you had when you and I had talked before, one of the other things you had talked a little bit about was yeah, the experiences that you've had. There was kind of a pivotal moment where you kind of discovered, ooh, like process improvement. Not only is this something I'm really good at, but it's something that's like super important. What was
Mhm.
that point in your career where that happened?
Um, well, I don't know if there was really a point. I mean, probably the first opportunity that I had to make a big change was my first corporate full-time job, and that was at a big corporate hospital affiliation office. And I revamped our bank reconciliation process from something that was like pen and paper and highlighters to completely automated in Excel. And that gave me kind of that first experience of making big changes and seeing the impact it had on not only myself, but other people that I worked with. And it just really triggered something for me. Like, I really, really like this. I want to keep doing this. And I just kept doing it for process over process over process. And then I carried that forward in all of my other jobs. And I think it was just like something that grew with me over time. And I always thought it was really fun, but it just strengthened the more jobs that I did it with.
Hmm.
And then I just got to a point where it's like, I just was kind of fed up with working for crappy bosses
Hmm.
and companies that wanted me to do unethical things. And I
Hmm.
was just like, I can't do this anymore. I want to work for myself. I don't want to deal with that kind of stuff. I just want to take this knack that I have and help as many companies as I can. So it's kind of a growth thing for me, I would
Hmm.
say.
Yeah, it's like it started. There was like little seeds that were planted, and then as you progressed, you just kind of discovered more and more. Like, oh no, this is really the thing that I want to do.
Yeah.
That's super cool. So, knowing kind of your background in process improvement and also the unique niche that you've chosen to kind of go after CPG. Do you mind if I ask you some questions to talk
Yeah,
about process improvement in the CPG space? Is
sure.
that cool? I mean,
Mhm.
talk a little bit
Yep.
about. Okay, so first question I have for you is what was it about consumer packaged goods, right?
Uh-huh.
CPG.
Yep.
What is it about this industry that kind of drew you in?
Yeah. Well, when I first became more active on LinkedIn, I was kind of connecting with people of all industries, and I didn't really have a niche. But one thing that I really, really loved was seeing all these different founders and leadership in the CPG space. Everybody is so very, very supportive and encouraging of each other. And I just think that's amazing. And it's so interesting to see that in what I would consider as kind of a cutthroat industry. Everybody's scrambling over shelf space and stuff, but
Mm,
everybody is handing out suggestions and tips and their experiences on things, and they're lifting each other up. And I'm all for that. I love it.
mm,
The other thing that I really like about it is that it's very heavily inventory based.
mm,
And I know that inventory is an area that involves a lot of risk
mm,
in errors and in being mismanaged. So I really like all the complexities and moving parts of inventory and the way that it relates to accounting and operation decision making. So that's kind of what drew me specifically into that niche.
Yeah, that's so good. So what I'm hearing you say is, where some people would see complexity and they'd be like, "Oh gosh, get me as far away from this as possible." You're
Yeah.
like, "I'm going to go head first into this
Yep.
because
Yep.
you like the challenge."
I
But
do.
but you also have so much to offer in that space, right? Like
Yep.
it can be really complex, but if you got
Mm-hmm.
somebody who not only understands the accounting side of the house, but is
Yep.
also like a process improvement guru, like it just
Mm-hmm.
makes sense for you to kind of
Yep.
naturally gravitate towards that.
Yep.
It's interesting that first point you were talking about, just like the overall feel in the CPG industry. It sounds like you were seeing a lot of very supportive, people lifting each other up
Mm-hmm.
in the CPG space. That's super cool. And you found that primarily on LinkedIn?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Just all the engagement and content everybody was posting. It was just, to me, it's just fascinating to see that because I don't feel like I've seen that in other industries
Mm,
before. And I just love how positive and supportive it is. It's
hmm.
really neat to see.
That is super, super cool. Yeah, and it's something we've explored a little bit on this podcast before, but in order to be the best accountant you can be, you
Mm-hmm.
really have to have a passion for and a connection to the industry that you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
can't be like industry agnostic in the sense that like, it's just numbers. It's like you do want to have a vested connection to the
Mm-hmm.
things that drive the founders and the CEOs of
Yeah.
those businesses. So
Yeah.
I think that's really
And
cool.
I'll say I'm an avid fan of Shark Tank. So I've seen a lot of these companies on there and I just love following their stories. It's just really amazing to watch their journeys. I love it.
That is so cool. The one story that comes to my mind is the what is it, the no bake cookie dough?
There's a lot of those.
Yeah, there are. They're cropping up
Yeah.
quite a bit,
Yeah.
and my wife loves that. I myself
Mm-hmm.
don't eat sweets, but my wife, we were at a mall and I think they had like a where you can like scoop it, like it's basically like having like an ice cream store, but it's just
Yeah,
cookie dough,
absolutely.
and she's
Uh-huh.
like, "This is brilliant. This is so
Yeah.
great." So one of the many reasons to love the CPG industry, right
Yep.
there. So I got another question for you. So obviously the show is Ask an Accountant, so there's
Mm-hmm.
an accounting bend to it, but you in your current position, you're not like an accountant per se, but you do use a lot of the same, I guess, skills and abilities and knowledge set to bring
Mm-hmm.
the most value to your clients.
Yep.
So in what ways did your experience as a corporate accountant influence your approach to process improvement?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, I mean, obviously my corporate accounting experience got me really, really good at doing accounting processes in a lot of different industries. I've been in construction and auto dealers, not for profits, restaurants, sporting event venues, a ton of different places. And what that really showed me is that there's so many aspects of running a business that are really similar across all different industries.
Hmm.
But also, each industry and each business has a very unique set of challenges that they need to overcome. So, seeing those similarities and differences, I think, helps me really be able to jump into a new business and hit the ground running because I know what things are probably going to be very fluid to work through, like every other company, and what things like we might need to be thinking about this differently because of your specific industry or business.
Hmm.
Um, and then, I mean, most importantly, like my corporate experience, to me, I feel like it was a test environment for trying out new processes and how I go about that. And through all the different jobs that I went through, and over time, I was able to create a method for increasing that efficiency, not just with accounting, but really how all of it relates to the roles and departments outside of accounting and within operations.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things that I kind of took with me from the corporate side of things.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up because I think this can be an often overlooked benefit about having accounting as your background
Mm-hmm.
is accounting touches everything, right?
Yeah.
Like
Mm-hmm.
we are not only do we touch everything, but we're also like the down one of the furthest downstream processes in an overall
Yeah.
business process
Mm-hmm.
flow. And so because of it, if we want to be like really good process improvement gurus and stuff, we need to be like really well tapped on all processes because
Yeah.
everything has an impact on
Mm-hmm.
accounting and finance. Um,
Absolutely.
so I'm really glad that you brought that up because I want people to hear like accountants, especially corporate accountants, do have a
Mm-hmm.
lot more exposure to process
Yeah.
like overall company process, which is super cool.
Hmm.
And then that first piece again, can you reiterate like what that first one, like how accounting really kind of influenced your approach to process improvement? I'm just trying to remember what that first one was.
Yeah. So, I mean, what I would say to that is, working from how you said, we're really the downflow of all the information and processes. Whenever I would be working in corporate accounting and there would be some kind of a hang up in my process that was something that came from outside of my department or my role, it really taught me to look outward and see the process from start to finish instead of just
Mm,
my aspect of it. And so I actually was very heavily involved with people outside of my department and within operations to work on bottlenecks and challenges and improve their function of that process to get it to flow to me better.
that's so good.
And so that's why I just got into this methodology of don't just look at your part. You have to look at everything
The
to
big
create the
picture.
biggest impact in these processes.
That is so good. Yeah, you gotta have a big picture understanding. I
Mhm.
think it was Mark Corum who we had on a couple episodes ago,
Mhm.
and he talked about what was it about accounting that brought that he was able to then take into software development, and he says, well, there's a lot of the same kind of like big picture thinking that you have to have
Mhm.
if you want to be successful in that space. So I love that accounting gives you kind of a bigger picture understanding as well.
Mhm.
Um, so you're talking a little bit about principles, methodologies when it comes to your process improvement, how you go about process improvement. So I'm kind of
Mhm.
curious, what are some of those principles and or methodologies that you employ in your process improvement initiatives?
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things is what I just touched on about really broadening your perspective of the process and looking at it from its origination until it's completely executed, looking and seeing every single person in the department who is affected by it, um, how challenges in one area can create challenges in another area, and things like that. So just really looking at how everything overlaps within the company is really critical. And in order to, like I said, to get the biggest bang for your buck, if you're trying to improve a process or improve efficiency, is looking at it in its entirety. So, kind of as an example, uh, to go off of what I was talking about earlier, if I'm in accounting and I need a report from somebody and I have to have it by a certain date to have it completed for a task that I have a deadline on, if they're always getting it to me late and that's causing a strain on me to get my task done on time, I can't just go to them and say, it's always late. I need it by this day. Make sure you get it to me. I mean, they're going to be feeling defensive and, what incentive do they have to get it to you on time?
Hmm.
So a better way to approach it is to say, hey, I notice that you're always getting this to me by this day. Is there a hang up on your end? Is there something else that's causing you to get it to me late? And I guarantee you most of the time they're going to say, yes,
Mm-hmm.
it takes me this long to do this part of my process and I get it from somebody else, or there's going to be some other scenario going on. So if you come at them by looking at the whole process and trying to fix it where those earlier bottlenecks may be, that's going to just help the flow all the way down the line.
Mm-hmm. That is
Yeah.
so good. So I apologize for the crass analogy, but I
Mhm.
do tell people when I think about processes, I think about it like a stream, right? And if
Mhm.
we're in accounting and we're far downstream, it's a lot easier to walk
Yeah.
upstream and ask the person to stop pooping in the stream than it is to go and clean it up later, right?
That's
So,
very true. Yeah.
right? So always go back
Yep.
upstream,
Yep. I'm going to remember that one.
right? We'll use it with some of the poop emojis that I love to use on LinkedIn. So that
Oh,
works
that's a
out
good
great.
one.
No, I love that. And I think the other thing that I hear in what you were just talking about is there is also such a human element to process
Mhm.
improvement, right? Like
Yep.
coming in, like even how you approach that person who is the bottleneck for your
Mhm.
process has a drastic impact on whether or not
Mhm.
you can be successful with your process improvement initiative, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
It's like what you said. It's like if I come in guns a blazing, why didn't you get me this thing, on this date?
Yeah.
Then they're going to be defensive.
Yeah.
But if you come in and say like, hey, what can I do to help you?
Yep.
Totally different.
Yep. That is exactly it.
Totally,
So
totally.
that's one of my methodologies. Another one is Making a process as repeatable as possible.
Mm,
So that doesn't mean just making it easy for you yourself to repeat over and over if it's like a weekly or a monthly task, but making it repeatable for anyone to come in and be able to pick it up and run with it. So obviously there may be a level of competency to a certain task that the person needs to have, but if they're at that level of competency, they should be able to take your process and completely replicate it on
mm,
their own
mm,
and have no problems and have no errors, and that type of thing. So the methodology of really strong documentation for the process, whether it's an SOP or just an extra tab in your Excel sheet with an example, utilizing data dumps and formula automation, just making things simplified and repeatable is really the way to go.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's so great. I mean, do you have in your experience now working with, helping a lot of different organizations document, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
is there like a go-to, technology that you use to be doing the documentation, or like, what does that look like for you?
I mean, until recently, really all I've ever utilized was like using your screenshot tool, and placing that with written instructions into either a Word document or Excel, and just being very clear on everything. And a lot of with a lot of my clients, what I do sometimes too is do a video recording, and I'll actually walk them through how to do things, and leave that for them to use to be able to repeat the process as well. So either of those works well. It just kind of depends on the preference of the person who's going to be using those instructions. Typically, in a corporate setting, you're going to want it to not be in video. You want them to be able to see the steps.
Hmm.
So we typically write those out with screenshots. But yeah, that's the gist of what it is so far.
Yeah. Well, and I love just getting like an insight into that, because I think sometimes we can make process documentation so much more complex, but like
Mm-hmm.
you can do it with a Word document. Like it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this,
Yeah.
you have to have fancy technology in order to document your processes.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to get to, like you said, is a repeatable process that other people can pick up.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And that is that's key. That's key. So, Jamie, you work a lot with CEOs and founders and COOs.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, what would you say are some of the most common pitfalls you see those folks falling into when it comes to how they run their operations?
Yeah, absolutely. I came across this a lot early on in my corporate accounting career. I do come across it with clients as well. And that's really just where you have a founder or leadership, somebody who's a decision maker that is kind of really just stuck in the status quo. We've always done things this way. It's worked so far. We don't have time to try and change a process, yada yada. So it's kind of a sticking point in trying to implement change is that they don't see the need for it.
Hmm.
So one thing that's really important, I feel, for companies, especially as they're growing and hiring on more staff, not just the aspect of improving the processes to improve your bottom line or reduce workload, but to give your employees a sense of empowerment to make the decision to change a process if it's not working for them. Because nobody wants to be bogged down with a task that's super manual or just annoying and a headache. So if they have the flexibility to change something to make it more enjoyable to complete, easier for somebody else to help them with, I mean, it's just the benefits are endless,
Hmm.
and it really helps your employees feel empowered and feel happy with their work. And you're probably going to have less grumpy workers and less
Hmm.
turnover. So, all around, it's just a good thing to have an open mind to, looking at different processes.
Hmm. That's so good. Yeah. I'd imagine you probably also have higher engagement from your
Mhm.
employees.
Yeah.
They feel a little bit more ownership. Like if they feel like they can co-author with you in process
Mhm.
improvement,
Yeah.
it might be.
Well, and that's a huge basis of my process too with trying to change things is the whole aspect of, okay, where are we at with things now? What are you stuck on? What do you feel is a challenge with it? making changes to it, coming to them and presenting it to them, working through it and saying, okay, does this feel good? Could it be improved? Are there new challenges with this? Reworking it and just really going back and forth until you've nailed it down to where it's the most efficient and most enjoyable for them to get done.
Yeah, that is so good. And you're kind of already touching on this a little bit, but when you think about all those positive changes that you are bringing to the table, how are you bringing that change in an organization when senior leaders, middle managers, and frontline workers seem to be, like you said, kind of stuck in their ways? Like, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, really, it's just all about coming across with the mindset of being collaborative. You don't ever want to approach something with, well, this is going to benefit me, so I need you to do this. That's not going to get you anywhere with anyone, unless you're really good friends or something. They just want to help you out, but really showing them how it's going to be positively impactful for them or as the company as a whole, is what I find really gets people on board to make those changes. Like back to my example, when I did the bank reconciliation, I had this one coworker who he loved his highlighters and paper, and he did not want to take the time to learn a new process. He's like, my process is fine. I balance within a few pennies every month. And I was like, well, let me just show you what I came up with. I think you're really going to like it, and I guarantee you're going to balance to the penny every single month, and that's going to be really fast. So I sat down with him and I showed him my process step by step. And then it's like the light bulb went off in his head and he's like, wow, this is really cool. I think I'm going to give it a shot. So, it wasn't me just saying, hey, the manager liked this and everybody has to do it. Let me show you why you're going to like it. So that's, kind of the mindset that I try to approach everything with.
Well, and that's super helpful when you think about, I don't know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when you talk to people who are being introduced for the first time, a totally new way of doing stuff,
Yeah.
there's something about seeing it and like actually like getting hands on with like a prototype of that solution. It seems like it kind of just like, I don't know, takes away a lot of that resistance. Has that been your experience too?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that's difficult for a lot of people to be told, like, hey, we're going to make this change, is that they worry about the unknowns. Like, oh, you say this is going to be faster and easier, but what if, this or that? If these other things may be even more of a challenge than the ones I was dealing with before. So just the unknown of how it's going to be different can be really intimidating for a lot of people. So, like you said, just showing them, kind of walking through the process, getting feedback from them, letting them know that their concerns are heard, and that you're going to address them is a really big turning point in getting people to be on board with the change.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. If there's something that I've learned, and you probably have also learned this a lot, it sounds like you have, when it comes to process improvement, so much of it is change management.
Yeah.
So much of it is the people element of the process, and it can be overlooked really easily. So I think that's a helpful insight. That's really good. That is really, really good. So another question that I have for you. So we talked a lot about like kind of process improvement in general, but I want to kind of get back to, if we can for just a minute, accounting and like finances when it comes to CPG. And so specifically, when you think about timely financial data, right? Like accountants are all about timely, relevant, accurate. Those are our big things as accountants. When you think about timeliness of financial data, how would you define timeliness for a CPG company? And like, what would be the impact to a CEO or a COO if they don't have timely financial data?
Yeah, absolutely. So with CPG companies specifically, if they're not utilizing real-time financial information, it can be very costly to their company. It could be a tangible cost, or it could be missed sales. If they don't have real-time data on the costs of all the products they're sourcing, or real-time data on their inventory levels, that's going to make it really hard to make a split second decision on different selling channels that you're using, opportunities on new selling channels, if they'll be profitable or not. Minimum order quantities. Does it make sense to bump it up and have less cash, or do we want to back it down and, worry about other things? Thinking about lead times on getting your materials and products makes a big difference. Can you approve the timeline on a purchase order or a commitment? And then also having accurate numbers for the quantity levels on your e-commerce site. You don't want to promise people that you've sold them a product, but it's actually back ordered and it's going to take us 6 weeks to get more product in. So having as real time of data as you can on those things is important. And so that comes back to that circular flow of information, that operations needs to be accurate and quick in getting the information to finance so they can quickly and accurately get it back to operations to make those decisions when needed. Because a lot of times those things come up and you have to make a decision pretty quickly.
Right.
So
yeah.
yeah.
And split second. And I imagine, especially like as you're serving high growth CPG companies, those types of gut, last minute decisions, there are probably a lot more of them to make because they're growing at such a rapid pace, and they need to be knowing, what are, like you said, my inventory, my inventory levels. Christopher Day writes in, he says, CPG data, if it's not accurate, we die.
Yeah, that's very true.
Very, very, very true.
Yeah.
It's interesting when I had asked the question, like, what constitutes timeliness for CPG? The words that I heard you say over and over again, real time, real time, real time, real time, which I think is so telling, and it's so necessary in this field, right? Some fields you can get away with, maybe a monthly cadence, maybe a bi-weekly cadence. But with CPG, inventory levels, all that kind of stuff, it needs to be real time.
Yeah.
So, we talk about your process improvement initiatives and the stuff that you're helping companies to do as an organizational efficiency consultant. When you talk about the work that you do, you're essentially getting more timely and more accurate financial information, right?
Yeah.
So, basically what you're saying is you're empowering CEOs and COOs to make better educated decisions.
Absolutely. Yep.
Right?
Yep. And that's going to help their company in the long run. So definitely.
That's super helpful. Well, I wanted to say, Jamie, thank you so much for this time to talk a little bit about process improvements and your experience in the CPG space. I want to give you a chance before we wrap up for you to give some of your words of wisdom, just share as you feel so led. But I want you to just imagine for a moment, you are talking with a CEO or a COO of a high growth CPG company. Okay. They probably have 10 employees and they're really just bogged down with their inventory right now. What words of wisdom would you, Jamie Skinner, give to that person or those people to address that pain point?
Yeah. Well, I think really in any stage of a CPG company, but especially when they're in high growth, is the most important thing you can do is to be proactive and not reactive. If you are constantly putting out fires, it is not going to be sustainable and it's going to run your company into the ground. So you always need to be thinking a couple steps ahead. What are we going to need next? What challenges are we going to encounter with that? How is that going to affect the work that our staff does? It's really, really critical just to be trying to mitigate bottlenecks and errors as much as possible just by using that forward thinking. So stop putting out fires and start, investing a little bit of time and money into getting your systems in place before you really, really need them and create a huge fire in that case. So yeah, that's the best advice I have.
You heard it here. Be proactive, not reactive. As a quick side note, I know of a great way for you to invest in your business to be more proactive instead of reactive. And her name is Jamie Skinner. But that's beside the point. Jamie, thank you so much for joining us today on the call. I imagine people are going to listen to this and be like, Jamie Skinner, I want to get in contact with her. She seems super awesome. She's also a golden retriever like me, and she's just a phenomenal person. Where could people go to get in contact with you if they wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on there, Jamie Skinner. I think I'm the only one that's in Reno, Nevada. So you can find me there, or you can find me on my website. It's just www.orgefficiency.com. And I'm happy to start up a conversation with anyone.
Perfect. And I will second the whole LinkedIn thing. I've loved seeing her posts. She's always inspirational to me. So I always appreciate what you're posting out there. And if you need to, if you are following me and you'd like to get in contact with her, just see where I'm posting. And chances are I'm going to be posting on something that she has posted as well. So, Jamie, again, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody who has been listening today. I hope you all found value in our episode. If you have pressing accounting questions that you would like future guests to answer, you can go ahead and email me at tony@acquip.com. That's ACCQUIP.com. Also, if you are an accounting professional or you know somebody who'd be interested in coming on the show, please reach out to me as well. I want to thank you all again so much for tuning in today. And as always, keep calm and keep your clothes on.
Thanks, Tony. Bye.